So in today's video, we're watching Dreamstrike, who's doing a video on the best Black Ops 6 Warzone perks. Now, I've watched a lot of Dreamstrike's videos. He has absolutely amazing content and puts a lot of effort into these. So I'm super excited to kind of see what we got going on here. Let's go ahead and play it.
I tested every Black Ops 6 Warzone perk, and I have the data that shows that 2 of the most popular perks are not even working, and several other popular ones are actually terrible. So in this video, I'm going to quickly go through the data.
I have heard this. There's a lot of perks in the new Black Ops 6 that aren't really working intentionally, or like some of the perks are like super useless. And I'm pretty sure Dexterity is one of them.
This has been pretty popular so far from the streamers that I watch, but when you dig into the numbers, it might be a bit overhyped. Now, Dexterity has 2 main benefits.
Like
the
Mountaineer,
fall damage,
which is not even close.
From the last Warzone. But unfortunately, Dexterity is much less impressive. I did a lot of fall damage testing in Plunder, and I found that baseline fall damage starts at 5.5 meters. Then up to 12 meters, you get partial fall damage with not really any noticeable ground stun effect.
Okay.
But then after 12 meters is when you start getting stunned when you hit the ground. And then around 13.5 to 14 meters is where fall damage is fatal. Now,
so that's at the base. I will say, for some reason, like the stun when you take fall damage is so annoying, because I know in Warzone 1 and originally when we had it where you would take fall damage, when you had enough like height to not take fall damage, you wouldn't take any damage. You also wouldn't get stunned. Or if you were like a meter higher, you would break your leg. So like I do like fall damage because it's kind of like that happy medium between just like falling and not being able to like have any negative effects, and also like not just breaking your legs. But I feel like the stun effect is just, I don't know, it's just too much for me. And I feel like the fall damage is already a big enough negative. I kind of wish they would take away that stun effect completely.
This is pretty similar to the last Warzone, but this is where things get weird. If you remember, Mountaineer basically doubled the height that you could fall without dying. Well, Dexterity doesn't even come close to that. With the perk enabled, you start to get fall damage at 7 meters. You start to get noticeably stunned when you hit the ground at 14 meters.
So useless.
And then around 17 meters, fall damage is fatal. And if we compare Dexterity to the baseline fall damage
14
directly,
meters.
you can see that it's not that impressive. We essentially get an extra 1.5 meters before fall damage starts, and then we only get about 3 more meters before fall damage is fatal.
Yeah, that's
this
insane.
Is definitely a huge nerf compared to the last Warzone. Now, the other benefit to Dexterity is that you get reduced weapon motion when moving. So to test this, I went to the exact same...
This, by the way, should be standard. I don't think we should have weapon sway. Like, this should just be default. You should not have any weapon sway on your guns or anything like that.
Same spot on the map with and without the perk, and I tried several different movements to see if there's any difference in the motion of my crosshair. Now, the left side of my screen is without Dexterity and the right side is with Dexterity, and I've also added a crosshair overlay so that you can see how much the center dot moves from the true center of the screen. If we compare jumping at full speed, my crosshair does move quite a bit more during the jump, and especially when I hit the ground, and you can see this more clearly when I slow down the footage. And similarly, when I dive,
but that's so minimal.
The crosshair movement is quite a bit more than with Dexterity, and you can really see a difference when I hit the ground. But here's where things got really interesting. I didn't see a whole lot of difference in the crosshair motion when sliding. I tested
I'm like looking back and forth, left and right,
the side, and I don't really see a noticeable difference even when I slow down the footage. And I think this is pretty important because based on how the developers designed this game, sliding is by far the most important.
The right one, by the way, if you guys are watching, is the right one has Dexterity.
Because even with this perk, when you jump, your crosshair just moves a lot, so jump shots are not nearly as effective in gunfights anymore. And then diving can catch your opponents off guard, but you do get stuck on the ground and you do lose a lot of momentum. So sliding is just way more important, and you're going to use it more frequently. So overall, I would probably say that this is a C tier perk.
Yeah, it's actually useless. It's honestly useless.
That much from the baseline. And then because your crosshair,
which is crazy because I've been using this ever since Warzone came out for the integration with Black Ops 6, and I don't even know why. I think I was just using it because it sounded like it was really good. It sounded like the best perk, but it just obviously on paper it's just not.
It's about the same when you're sliding. It really isn't that effective for reducing your crosshair motion. Okay, moving on to Survivor. Now, this was one of those perks that really surprised me.
I like Survivor.
There's a few benefits for Survivor, and the first main one is that you start regenerating health more quickly. And to test this out, I found a building where when I dropped off of it, I'd be one-shot or absolute, and I did that both with and without the perk, and then I recorded how long it took for my health to regenerate. Without the perk, my health started regenerating around 6 seconds, and it took almost 9 seconds to get to full health. And then with the perk, regeneration started around 3 seconds, and then I was at full health around 6 seconds.
Oh, that's pretty good.
In other words, when using Survivor, my health bar regenerated fully before I even started when not using Survivor or any other perks that affect your health.
Okay. See, the problem with this is like, I feel like it's not that useful. Like, it's very situational, but also at the same time, the perk one slot is very, very weak. Like Dexterity, obviously, like again, very, very weak. So I feel like Survivor's good, but it's not like amazing. It's not like insane.
Into that, Survivor did reduce the time it took for me to
Yeah,
get
kind of like a
revived.
medic vest.
Normally it takes around 5 seconds to do this, and with Survivor, it takes around 3.5 seconds. So this is a pretty big benefit. Overall, I put this perk in the A category because health regeneration in this game is really slow, and this does speed it up significantly.
6 seconds is crazy.
Think it's a great perk to have when you're playing with a team because you do get revived quite a bit faster. And you'll also see here in a second that some of the perks in the other categories that are supposed to help with health regeneration aren't nearly as effective as this one.
Yep.
Okay, moving on
Quick
to
fix.
Grenadier.
Horrible.
Now this is another perk that has a few different benefits, and the first one is that explosive damage slows enemy health regeneration. So to test this, I threw a Semtex at the feet of an enemy, and I recorded the time that it took for the health to regenerate. If you remember, normal health regeneration starts around 6 seconds, but with Grenadier, it went all the way up to 10 seconds, which is pretty insane.
My
Grenadier
gosh.
is also supposed to slow down enemy movement speed, so I did test this by throwing a Semtex at an enemy's feet once again, and I didn't really see a whole lot of difference in
I feel like there's not
movement
even a
speed,
difference there.
but there might be a little bit. It's just not that noticeable. You do also get to see the trajectory of your equipment when you throw it.
Like strong
and at least
arm.
according to the patch notes, you do get an increased throwing distance of 15%, but I wasn't really able to test this. Overall, I'd give this perk a B tier rating because even though the health regeneration is really nice, it does get hard countered by veteran, and there's going to be less grenade spam in this game now that the backpack system is gone. But this perk could be nice if you're playing support with a squad and, like, for instance, you're designated as the person who throws in grenades to get entry damage when you're fighting someone in a building.
This perk's only really good too if the other person's not using like quick fix or like he was saying veteran. I feel like it's kind of countered by a few things. So quick fix is pretty popular, and I'm sure he'll talk about it a little bit, but we'll see.
And now's a good time to talk about 2 perks that we haven't been able to unlock yet in the perk 1 category. The first is Veteran, which I just mentioned, and this reduces the negative effects of some enemy equipment. And I think that this is going to be really important in this game because this perk makes you more resistant to a lot of the tacticals in this game, like for instance flashes and stuns. And I think that a lot of people are going to be running these more offensive based tacticals in this game because smokes and stins were the predominant tacticals that people used in Warzone 3, but they've got heavily nerfed in this game, and I just don't think they're going to be as popular. So I'm giving this an A tier rating because I think this perk is going to be really useful, but it does depend on what people are running in their loadouts. Now the next perk that's still locked is Reflexes, and this perk gives a delay to triggered explosives when you're sprinting past them. And I think this is going to be another perk that's really good because one thing I haven't seen a lot of people talk about is they increase the maximum deployed equipment from 2 to 3. So what this means is that people who
I
are
actually
using
didn't know that.
trap-based explosives like the
I actually
new
didn't know
blast
that.
trap or the spring mine.
So basically, yeah, to explain that, like last Warzone, we could only have 2 proximity downs at a time or claymores or whatever. And I guess with this perk and this one, you could put down 3.
Be able to put 3 of these down instead of 2, which means that more entrances to buildings are going to be booby trapped. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to push teams that are camping buildings. Now I would give this an S tier rating, but because these types of traps aren't usually allowed in ranked, I knocked this down to A. So it's probably going to depend on what mode you're playing for whether or not you use this perk. Okay, and finishing off the perk 1 category is Scavenger, and I'll keep this short and sweet. I'm giving this a D tier rating because in theory you get more plates and ammo from dead enemies, but I think in this game you find plenty of loot just playing the game normally, and I just don't really think that this perk is worth it. Okay, moving on to perk category number 2.
I kind of disagree with that. I mean, maybe just because I'm a Resurgence player, I feel like Scavenger is probably one of the better. It's either Scavenger or Survivor. And like I said, the perk 1 slot is super weak right now. I feel like Scavenger's pretty good for a perk 1. I could understand the D tier rating, but I feel like Survivor being that high and Scavenger being that low is kind of crazy, especially since they're in the same perk package.
2. Now this category has several perks that are completely broken and that you should probably stay away from until they're fixed. Now up first is Quick Fix.
Yeah, it's not working intentionally.
To immediately start your health regeneration when you kill enemies or insert armor plates, but when I tested this, it definitely wasn't working. I had an enemy shoot me, and then I recorded the time it took for my health regeneration to start once I pressed my button to insert armor plates, and I really didn't see any difference between having the perk and not having the perk. I also tested it out with the throwing knife kill, and once again, I didn't really see any difference in the time.
I thought it worked a little bit faster than that. It doesn't have any difference right there.
Is that you are able to insert armor plates one-handed.
This is a really nice thing.
Fire while using armor plates. And just with testing it around and a little bit of plunder, I did find this useful for when enemies were pushing me. I think this could be an S tier perk, but because this perk is basically not working, I would recommend staying away from it.
I think what it is, it's like an A tier.
The next perk up is Cold-Blooded, and once again, I found another pretty big issue with this perk. Now, it's supposed to make you immune to tracker and to alertness, but what I found was that it does work against alertness, but it does not work currently against tracker. This
So it's bugged. I didn't know that.
Is running cold-blooded, and I'm still able to see their footsteps with tracker, which tells me it doesn't work. I do think that this is a bug though, and they probably will get it fixed, but it's something to keep in mind for now. I mean, I also did test out that it does appear.
Realistically, I will say tracker's pretty weak. You know, and it's like, it's not going to be the end of the world, I feel like. I mean, the combat scout, though, and high alert and all that stuff is super, super important. So hopefully cold-blooded still works against that. But I feel like tracker is like not the end of the world.
Appear to be working against the AI turrets, so that's good. And it does not work against snapshots or portable radars, which is pretty much what I expected.
Portable radars.
Because of this bug against alertness, I would recommend not using it right now. But once they do get that fixed, I would say that this is an A tier perk.
Yeah, I agree. Cold-blooded is going to be amazing.
Alertness, which I think is going to be one of the most broken perks in the
Combat
game.
Scout and Tracker.
Up next is Bomb Squad, and this really does two things for you. The first is that it reduces incoming explosive and fire damage. I did test that it prevents you from dying if you do get stuck with a Semtex. But when I took Semtex damage right at my feet, I didn't really see a major difference in the explosive damage. Now, the other benefit to Bomb Squad is you can spot enemy equipment and kill streaks through walls.
Oh, nice.
From my testing, the cutoff appears to be around 20 meters. And I do think that this is going to be pretty useful because, like I mentioned earlier, I do think that trap equipment is going to be meta.
Oh, and you can hack it.
So this perk would be useful to counter that. Overall, I'm giving this perk an A rating because the category 2 is kind of weird right now with quick fix and cold-blooded both being bugged. And if those two perks were working, this rating would probably be a little bit lower.
I will say once they fix quick fix and once they fix cold-blooded, I think for ranked specifically, cold-blooded is going to be the best because a lot of people that are using tracker, combat scout, alertness, all that stuff, cold-blooded just counters all of it. And it's kind of how we saw like the competitive stuff. If you guys do watch World Series of Warzone or a lot of the ranked players, I was even using cold-blooded in Rebirth ranked. So I think cold-blooded is a very, very strong perk for that. And if you're going to be like more of like a pub star or you want to, you know, get high kill games, a lot of like quick fix, moving quick, it's going to be super good for pubs, especially Resurgence. So I would say those two are probably, once they're fixed, probably A tier, even S tier perks.
Okay, up next is Tracker, and this perk really does three things.
So good.
The first is that it allows you to see enemy footsteps, and these footsteps fade over time, but they do last for a pretty long time, up to about 9.5 seconds.
So good. So good.
And the second thing that it does is when your bullets hit someone, they briefly mark that target for
Combat
you
Scout,
and your
basically.
squad. Up close, you get about 2.5 seconds of live ping, but then I also tested it at 100 meters, and at this distance, I got about 5 seconds of live ping.
Okay, so it's longer at a
When you just ping
distance.
someone regularly, you only get about 2 seconds at 100 meters. And then lastly, you're supposed to get an automatic ping when enemies down you, but from my testing, this is not a live ping. It just pings the last location of the enemy,
which is still good.
As useful.
I think it's still
Overall, I
good.
give this perk a C rating because the automatic ping feature really isn't that much more beneficial than just live pinging someone manually with your controller or with your keyboard. And then additionally, once cold-blooded is fixed, it's going to completely counter tracker and make this perk useless against a lot of players.
I agree.
Up next is Sprinter, and I definitely have some mixed emotions on this perk.
I really like that we have the option to have unlimited tactical sprint again because Warzone 1 we had unlimited tactical sprint, but I will say Sprinter's kind of useless and for a good reason. I love the dedicated knife that we have. The dedicated knife is amazing, and yeah, although you have to pull out a knife and you'd be running with your knife out and not your gun, I just feel like unlimited tactical sprint, if you just need to get from somewhere to somewhere else, you could just run with your knife out, and if it's like super important you need your gun, then just don't have unlimited talk sprint. So I feel like Sprinter's a very great addition, but I don't think a lot of people are going to be using it. You might see it a little bit on big map, but I really, really doubt it.
And what this perk does is it allows you to tactically sprint indefinitely. And it sounds great on paper because it brings us back to the old Warzone where you could just sprint and slide cancel endlessly around the map. And while that's kind of true now, there does appear to be some sort of fatigue that your character gets when you slide cancel too frequently. So when you try to chain slides together, you do lose some momentum over time. So even when you equip Sprinter, it's not the exact same as it used to be back in Warzone 1. Now, one thing I did want to test was using the melee knife compared to using Sprinter, because with the melee knife, you also do get infinite tac sprint. But the big downside to using the melee knife is if you do get caught by surprise, it does take time to swap to a weapon to be able to engage in a gunfight. And I found that the sprint to fire time was about 200 milliseconds slower when you had your melee knife out. But when I compared this to the slide to fire time, it was only about 100 milliseconds slower. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but because the time to kill in Warzone is pretty fast, and for some guns is like around 600 milliseconds, this is very significant. So overall, I'm giving this an A rating because
I didn't know, dude. Dream Strike's amazing. I didn't know that you had a quicker slide, like sprint to fire speed or slide to fire. That's insane. I didn't know that.
feel a lot more fluid when you're playing, but because you can use the melee knife to still have infinite attack sprint, it doesn't get up to that S tier rating. And rounding out the perk 2 slot, we have Quartermaster, and this perk recharges your equipment over time. And from my testing, this recharge rate is about every 50 seconds.
Right, basically
but like
restock.
I mentioned earlier, loot is pretty easy to find in Warzone, and there's so many munitions boxes and ways that you can replenish your equipment that I really don't think that this perk is necessary.
I agree.
So I'm giving it a D rating. Okay, moving on to the perk 3 slot, and up first we have Alertness, and this perk has 2 main benefits, and the first one is that you get a notification when
this
you're
is
near an
insane.
enemy
I hope
player.
Cold-Blooded
Now, I
box
tested
this.
and the cutoff appears to be around 30 meters, so this radius is pretty big. And this perk is pretty powerful because a big element in battle royales is the element of surprise, and this perk kind of eliminates that for a lot of players. And additionally, you also get warning bars on either side of your
basically
screen
high alert
when someone is aimed down sight and looking at you. And I did test this out. If someone is looking at you but not ADS'd, you get no warning at all.
Yeah.
The warning only starts when someone is aimed down sight and when their crosshair is within your character's hitbox. So this means you have less time to react when someone is looking at you compared to the last Warzone. And I did test this out, and this does work all the way up
Something that I really like about the new Warzone integration is that they added a lot of buffs, but they also added a lot of nerfs to like some stuff. So like obviously with the Combat Scout one, you also get Tracker. With something like this, Alertness, yeah, they're nerfing where high alert tells you exactly what direction they're at, and it's not even within an ADS. But now you get the benefit of having it telling you that there's enemies around, basically. So there's like a nerf and a buff to it, and I feel like they really balanced out a lot of things. Especially, again, looking even at like kill streaks, they had the cluster strike, which now it all hits one area super fast, which was kind of a buff. But the negative is it's not spread around, so it's super active in one singular spot for a certain amount of time rather than kind of spreading all over the place.
300 meters, and it probably works even further. I just didn't have a high zoom scope to test this out at the time. Overall, I'd say this is an A tier perk. It's really close to being S tier, but because it is going to be countered by Cold-Blooded, it just doesn't get.
I feel like it's not even A tier. I would probably give it C.
Sense enemy players
I don't think that's very
30
good.
meters away is pretty crazy, and it's definitely going to change how Warzone plays. Okay, up next is Bird's Eye. When you call in UAVs,
Bird's Eye is so
they're
good.
supposed to be about 25%
It's always been so
larger. And when I tested this with a regular UAV, it appears the limit is about 300 meters or so. And then when I had Bird's Eye, it did look like the range was a little bit bigger. It's really hard to tell the exact numbers for this to know if it's exactly
Bird's Eye's so broken,
but it does seem a little bit larger. Now, in addition to that, Bird's Eye also does show the heading of your enemy, so basically what direction they're going or looking, and then you do detect players with ghosts.
Unbelievable.
But overall, I don't think these two benefits are really that great, because when you see the heading of your enemy, what happens is you lose the elevation indicator, so you aren't able to tell.
You
when
do
someone
lose
is
the
above you or
elevation
below you on the
indicator,
map,
which
can be an issue. And then ghost just isn't
on Black Ops 6. Even if you had that Bird's Eye icon, you could see what level they are on, and they didn't do it for Warzone, which I was very surprised. So it's kind of a good thing because Bird's Eye didn't get like a crazy buff, but I will say still understanding where players are if they're ghosted, and it's unbelievable. Even if you're ghosted, you're just getting countered. So I don't know. Bird's Eye's insane. I don't think it'll be back into ranked or competitive modes. We'll see.
That popular of a perk anymore because you have to be moving for it to be active, so that really reduces the benefit of having Bird's Eye. Overall, I'd put this perk in the D category, and I think it's kind of a waste of a slot. Okay, moving on to Ghosts. This perk
would say
makes you
B.
undetectable to UAVs and to heartbeat sensors when you're moving. And this perk is pretty self-explanatory, but I did want to test how long it takes for you to stop moving to when you show up on a UAV. And I found that you really only have about 1.5 seconds where you can stand still to when you get detected.
It's good to know.
This perk really isn't all that useful. Overall, I'd put
Really
this in
great
the C
testing out of him.
category.
I can't lie, Dream Strike did a great job with this video.
Now, this perk allows you to reload while tack sprinting, and it's supposed to reduce your movement penalties when reloading or using equipment. Now, the tack sprinting and reloading does work, and it does feel very nice and fluid.
It does look
it's
good.
Definitely one of those perks I wish we had as our base like we did in the last game, but unfortunately we don't. Now, in terms of the reduced movement penalties, I did test and find out that you do run a little bit faster when you have equipment out with Gung Ho, and you're also able to slide while holding equipment, which could help you out in certain situations. I also did test reloading and diving, and it does appear with Gung Ho that you are able to get into attack sprint maybe a little bit faster, but it's kind of hard to tell if this is consistent or not. Overall, I think this perk is really good, but I also think that you pretty much need to be using Sprinter in your perk 2 slot to really get the full benefit of being able to reload while tack sprinting.
I kind of like that though. You can combo them together.
In the A slot because reloading while tack sprinting is going to save your life in a lot of situations. Okay, up next is Tempered, and this perk simply refills your armor plates to full with 2 plates.
I don't think they changed Tempered about anything. It's super great.
Is that I found that you could fully plate up about 1 second second faster, which makes this pretty useful in a gunfight.
You're also
and
using less
do
plates.
use less plates
Right.
overall, which is pretty important now that the backpack system is gone.
Agreed.
You can only carry 6 plates unless you get an armor satchel. Now, I did compare Tempered to Survivor because both these perks help you heal up faster, and I dropped off the top of a building until I was absolute health, and I recorded the time it took me to heal up.
So similar to like Quick
Basically,
Fix.
Tempered gives you a little bit of a health edge for the first 4 seconds or so, and then Survivor quickly surpasses it because the health regeneration on Survivor is just much faster. And overall, I would recommend choosing Survivor over Tempered in most cases because Survivor is going to also help you heal up faster from fall damage, whereas Tempered's not going to help you with that. Overall, I'm putting Tempered in the B category.
Quick Fix and Tempered is once Quick Fix is fixed, is going to go crazy.
It gives you a little bit of a speed boost when you're taking damage from gunfire.
Resolute is crazy, especially with the stim boost.
The speed boost lasts about 5 seconds. I wasn't able to test how much faster, but according to the patch notes, you get a 15% speed bonus. I'm putting this perk in the B category because the speed boost is significant.
It is pretty good.
Will help you win some gunfights, and it also could help you make rotations if you do get caught out in the open. And these are the perk combinations that I recommend trying out depending on your playstyle and
Let me
what
read these
mode
real
you're
quick.
playing.
So for movement, Survivor, Sprinter, Gung-Ho, or Resolute makes sense. I mean, with the stims, you get up to 15% boost, and then with Resolute and the stims, you get up to 20%, which is incredible. I think that's super fast. So you might see a lot of people running stims too, obviously with movement. Survivor, Resurgence wins. Survivor, Bomb Squad, Tempered. I like that one. Big Map wins. Survivor, Tracker, Tempered. I feel like, yeah, Tracker, no counter right now, but Tracker, like I said, it's just not like great. It's not like amazing, especially with smokes kind of getting nerfed. I feel like a lot of people, you don't really need to track them through anything. It's kind of like game sense at that time. So I don't know about Tracker. I'm not like super huge on that. And then Stealth Solo, Survivor, Cold Blood, Alertness. I really do think that once Cold Blood is fully fixed, it's going to be the best perk in the game.
There are quite a few perks that are bugged right now, so this probably will change once all these get fixed, but this is what I recommend for now.
Wow.
I dare you.
Yo, honestly, a great video from Dream. I've seen his content a lot, and he's incredible. If you guys haven't subscribed to him, I will put it down in the description. And yeah, let me know what perks you guys are using down in the comments. Again, shout out Dreamstrike for the video. Super, super informative, and really appreciate him doing all that research. It's awesome.